Thank you, everybody, for registering for the first of our Thought Leadership in 15-minute sessions. I'm Helen Trudgeon. I'm Head of Marketing and Business Development for Meridian West. And this is the first in a short series of masterclasses in thought leadership. We're doing them in 15 minutes, really to give you some bite-sized snapshots without cutting too much into your day, but hopefully the really good, juicy topics around thought leadership. Next week, we'll be going on to look at advanced research techniques, so I hope you'll be able to sign up for those ones as well, and I will be sending you details of that. For those of you who don't know Meridian West, we are a research consultancy. We focus on thought leadership, client insight and feedback programs, and market strategies for professional services, financial services, and the B2B sector more widely. Now I'll hand over to Matt Baldwin, who is chairing the session for us today. Matt is Managing Director of Coast Communications, a PR and journalist agency. Matt, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, and good afternoon, everybody. In this 15-minute masterclass, we're going to guide you through what makes a successful thought leadership campaign. And we brought together a standout team of experts who have a long track record of delivering some of the best campaigns that the professional services space has seen. And this afternoon, we're going to touch on three quite broad themes. First is how to choose the right campaign theme. Secondly, some practical tips on campaign planning. And then the one that I'm particularly looking forward to is on how do you engage internal audiences when we're all out of the office. The masterclass, it's going to run for 15 minutes and then a period of questions afterwards for a further 15 minutes. So if you want to raise questions, please use the conversation tab and we'll pick up those afterwards. But before we kick off, I would like to introduce our speakers. Sasha, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Sasha Rodrigues. I'm a business development manager for the life sciences sector at Pinsent.
Thank you. Suzanne.
Yes, hi everybody, Suzanne Snowden. I'm a director of Message Consulting Limited, and I'm working with clients who want to create great thought leadership.
And Alastair.
Hi everyone, I'm Alastair Beddow, Managing Director at Meridian West.
Thank you very much. Now, our first question, and I'm going to put this one to Alastair. As Helen alluded to earlier, Meridian West have been behind a large number of thought leadership campaigns across the law, accountancy, real estate and consulting markets, and probably some others I've left out there. And Alastair, I think we'd be really interested on your thoughts on what campaign themes you're seeing at Meridian West at the moment. And how should a firm at this particular point in time go about choosing the right themes for a thought leadership campaign?
Thanks, Matt. Well, a big question, but I think a kind of a short answer. I think I had a look back at all of the campaigns that we'd been working on, certainly this year, and unsurprisingly, COVID features very heavily. I think there's kind of two big ways that COVID has really featured in terms of thought leadership over the last 6 to 9 months. The first is around from a kind of business resilience and recovery aspect. So particularly things like supply chain disruption. How do you get over simply the hurdles of doing business in this pandemic world? There's been a lot of focus on that. How have organizations learned the lessons of the pandemic? I think the second big theme is around kind of future looking transformation. So what will the pandemic mean for the future in the way that different industry sectors operate? And we've been working with clients looking at things like the banking industry, the insurance industry, healthcare. What does COVID mean for some of the long-term trends in terms of transformation, operational change? But I think quite interestingly, and I think this will be a big trend for next year, what does it mean to try and transform your operations at a time when budgets and a squeeze, we're possibly going to a prolonged period of recession? So how do you manage that cost pressure whilst also transforming your organization? Three other quick things, which I think themes that we've seen bubbling under the surface for the last 12, 18 months that I think will be really important going into 2021. The first of those is around the purpose-led organization. So a lot around ESG, organizational purpose, responsible capitalism, responsible organizations. I think that will continue to be a really big theme, particularly in the light of the pandemic. I think the second one is around digital data analytics. Again, ties into that transformation narrative, but some bigger picture themes around the future of work, connected cities, for example. And then the third thing, I think, is what does growth look like in the kind of 2021 and beyond, particularly when the economic environment is going to be really challenging. And I think we're going to see, organizations thinking about how do they tap into new customer trends and new global trade patterns, post-Brexit. And if Trump wins today, what does that mean for relations with China and all the rest of it? That will, I think, come back onto the agenda in a big way. So lots of themes kind of both related to the pandemic, but coming out of that, looking forward into 2021.
Alastair, thank you for that. Suzanne, maybe a point maybe you'd like to pick up on is how do firms find the white space around when picking their own theme? Is how do they find that white space and just so they're not echoing what everybody else is doing?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things in my 4 points for planning is competitors. So I think a good starting point is to look at what your competitors are saying. It's never been easy to really rise above the noise, particularly in professional services marketing, but now more acutely than ever, it's really difficult. So I would say it's a good time to do a quick competitive content review and see how their messages are landing and how that might inform what themes you pick. The other thing that's really tricky at the moment is, as Alastair mentioned, is picking a theme that's sympathetic but positive. And, it's really tricky now to help your teams get back to business in an old-fashioned way, because strictly business type topics, the messaging could be perceived as a bit insensitive, deals, operational effectiveness, outsourcing, etc. So it's all about striking a good balance for next year.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And once you have the right theme, Suzanne, I mean, that is just the starting point. I mean, the real hard work follows really on from there. What advice could you give to those that are in the planning stages of campaigns at the moment, and particularly when so many of us are still working from home? What are the key things that we need to consider at the moment?
Yeah, having a plan and sticking to it is pretty much essential for producing anything of value. And I feel at the moment that we're all finding it really harder than ever to achieve that, particularly sticking to it. If you've got a deadline that you want to launch something, and we all know that that's just going to slip at the moment. But I think the four tips I would offer are: first, make your strategy your starting point for anything you're doing. Why are you doing it? How does your project support your firm's overall vision, your purpose? And how, to your question, how does this more difficult now? Well, I think that's kind of obvious. I've spoken to a lot of clients. Their budgets aren't approved yet. Their vision is less clear than it ever has been. All the strategy initiatives, new initiatives, have been parked in favor of keeping the business liquid, keeping staff, keeping clients safe. So the messages have been more tactical and more ad hoc. So it's not a bad thing, I think, right now to pivot quickly. However, it makes it really hard to plan for the next 12 months. So that second point is competitors, which I've already mentioned. What are your competitors saying? And that helps you to find that white space that you might be looking for. Everyone's curating their content in COVID-19 portals at the moment, but it's all about, can you find a breakaway topic to help position you more distinctively? The third thing is your audience. Who is your audience? Is it everyone? Is it your clients that are in crisis? Is it our clients that are striding ahead? So the virus has been the catalyst for some major structural changes in all these markets, some which might not go back. And these will eventually lead to the end of some sectors and maybe the birth of new ones. So who are you trying to reach? The winners or the losers? Actually, arguably, the losers might be the ones that need your advice the most. So perhaps maybe thinking about your segmentation a little differently, based on maybe clients that have proximity with customers versus clients that don't. And then finally, what's your timeline from creation to release? And this is the really hard thing. How are you going to reach that deadline? What inputs do you need? How are you going to develop the evidence to support your review? Are you doing research, polls, interviews? How are you going to get these done in COVID? So yeah, considering that we thought this was a 3 to 6 month thing and nature doesn't plan quarterly, we're definitely going to have an unsettled year again in 2021. Finally, I think I should stop here, but who do you need to engage internally, which I'll pass back because I know you're going to talk about that next.
Yeah. Thank you, Suzanne. I think the summary is there is actually a lot of the planning is exactly what would have been prior to COVID as well. Yeah. It's just an added further dimension. Sasha, Pinsent Masons are having a look at. They've got a fantastic campaign running, the Innovation in Healthcare campaign, which I've been keeping a close eye on, and I think it's a what I quite like about it, it's a great example of a campaign that perhaps started before COVID, but has actually worked well both with your internal and external audiences. And I just wonder, a question in two parts. I think firstly, it'd be really interesting if you could share just a little bit behind the campaign and the impact it's had. But also, I think the bit that I think we're probably most anxious to hear about is how do you engage with those internal audiences to make a campaign like this a success?
No, absolutely. I think for me, internal engagement from audiences is probably one of the most important parts of campaign planning, because there's been so many situations where I've worked on a project, done all this work in developing content, it lands on a partner's desk, and then it doesn't actually go anywhere. And as a business development and marketing professional, that's the most frustrating thing that can happen. So getting that internal buy-in, both at the outset of a project, then also actually throughout a project, I think is really key and something that maybe we forget about a little bit. So the campaign that we're running at the moment, as I said, I've managed the business development for the life sciences sector. So what we're looking at is how to incentivize innovation within the sector, specifically how to use the law and legal frameworks to do so. So what we've done is we've separated that kind of umbrella topic out into a number of different sub areas, each of which we have specialists within. So things like looking at how the IP and patent system is fit for purpose and whether that can be used to help spur the innovation that both the industry but also patients, as we're seeing now, really demand. So what we've done is for each of those different topic areas, we've undertaken a series of interviews with clients, commissioned industry surveys, and have also done internal interviews. And then off the back of that, we're producing a series of in-depth articles, talking heads videos, case studies, and then hopefully culminating in a report that our clients, but also our public policy team, can then take to regulators and government to talk to them about what needs to change. And I think kind of coming back to that internal stakeholder piece, two of the things I think we did quite well and that have really worked with the engagement was hosting an ideas lab at the outset, and then throughout the project, hosting a series of kind of internal discussion groups. So with the ideas lab, what we did, and Meridian West are our partner on this project, so Meridian West came in and we got all of our senior stakeholders together in one room, and this was pre-pandemic, so it could be in an actual room. So that was both our head of the sector, but also the jurisdiction leads and our service line leads. And Meridian West essentially led a discussion on what they were seeing in their market, what they were talking to clients about, and actually what they wanted to achieve off the back of the project. And I think that engagement at the outset really helped ensure that they were supportive of the project, and then that could cascade down to the rest of the team as well. I think if they're involved in the idea generation, it's just so helpful in ensuring that engagement throughout. And then in terms of how we maintained engagement, for each of the areas I mentioned before, we identified our key specialists for that area, and we held a series of discussion interviews. So for example, taking IP and patents as an example again, we got all of our IP and patent specialists onto one call, and Meridian West conducted an interview with the team, and they asked them about, what they saw as the issues, what they saw that was happening at the moment, what were the barriers, what did they want to hear from clients. And then off the back of that, we built the content, we built the interview discussion guides for clients, we built the industry surveys. So they were really involved in the creation of the project itself. And not only did that help with engagement, but it really helped give them the confidence to be able to speak to clients about the project as well, because they had been involved in it, they knew about it, and it just really helped in the engagement and talking part.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? It's that confidence point with fee earning colleagues at this particular point in time that is so critical, because they're working in an environment that is perhaps quite different to what they're used to, and it's giving them the confidence to have the conversations with clients that you as business development teams would like. Do you know, that's our 15 minutes up. I'm astonished we've actually managed to keep it to those 15 minutes. So thank you, Sasha, Suzanne, Alastair. We do have some questions already. I've got a feeling the conversation function on the call might actually be muted, so I'm not entirely sure if questions are coming through, but I do have one. So one of the questions, maybe Alastair, you might want to pick this one up first, is that we're seeing firms creating content in ever increasing quantities. Do you think there is a danger that clients are being over marketed to at the moment?
Well, I think that's been a kind of perennial challenge or pushback around thought leadership. But actually, the way that I always think about it is, and it comes back, I think, to what Suzanne was saying before about how kind of 4 points is, really where is your authentic voice as a firm? Where are the topics that you are both kind of credible at, because you've got the track record, you've got the experience, but also they will authentically resonate with your audience. And I think at this particular point in time, actually, there's a lot of thirst for knowledge and insight. What's happening? How do I plan for 2021? What's my supply chain looking like? What are my peers doing? And that's why professional firms are really great at, or should be really great at, having that big picture view, being able to distill it down into content that their clients and contacts can easily consume. So I would never discourage people from thinking about thought leadership, but I think it has to be done well, and it has to be authentic to really resonate.
Completely agree with that. Just to jump in, we saw at the very beginning of the pandemic, partners basically just say, we need to push out content, we need to run events, we need to do webinars, and actually we saw with our events in particular, clients were actually declining events, which is they never do, they normally just ignore. So that was really showing us that people were just saying, no, this is too much. And that really comes back to your point, Alastair, that if you're going to do something, it really needs to be something that resonates with the market. You need to pick a theme that works. You need to have planned it out properly, and you shouldn't just do something for the sake of doing
it. The chat function now is open, so if you do have a question, please type it in, and we'll pick those up.
Yeah, Matt, I just want to, just to support what Sasha said about relevance. I think there's a totally new lens on relevance right now, and that gut instinct from firms is like, oh, we got to get going, got to get content out there. But actually, do you? Because you might find that actually with that new lens, the urgency is not for something new necessarily, but there could be a way of dusting off what you already have and creating a new angle that's just as valuable. People just don't have time either. They're fighting fires left, right, and center. So they're less likely to be able to consume a whole new thing from you if they're a regular follower or whatever.
So that sort of segues actually quite nicely into a question that someone has asked. Is there actually an appetite still for the long form, chunky reports that traditionally accompanied thought leadership campaigns? Who might like to? Maybe Sasha, why don't we pick on you, as you're right through the middle of a campaign?
Great. I do think people are consuming content in a different way to how they did before. And I think now, particularly, as you said, everyone's so busy. They want short, bite-sized pieces of content. So short discussions, event series, roundtable discussions, in-depth articles, maybe less so the white paper piece. And if you're going to do the white paper, I think maybe the technical topics or a real reason behind doing it. So for example, the only reason that we're looking to do it is because we want a piece to be able to take to the regulators and to government. It's not as a talking point for clients. So I do think there has been a bit of a shift away from it, but I'd be interested to hear others' opinions.
Suzanne.
Yeah, actually, I would support that as well, because and this is not something that's just in 2020. I think there's been a long trend away from like the big written 50-page report, and for those that are driving big campaigns like that, there's ways of chunking it out into little content chunks and releasing it in phases and breaking it down into different packages, which is great because all of it is just so valuable. You don't need to just release it and go on holiday as we used to do, but rather, to select the nuggets and to create a longer pipeline, both before pre-launch and after launch, with nice interesting nuggets, because often they're research based and they've got lots of great insight in there that never sees the light of day because it's on page 20. And also I think that length, the word count that people are going for used to be 10,000, 20,000, then 5, now it's down to 4,000 or 5,000. That's not very much. That's 4 blogs. So yeah, I would definitely support what we're hearing on the trend there.
Alastair, sort of picking up on that, I wonder if there is a way that you can road test both ideas and both content out in a way that's sort of informed greater engagement or decision making. Is there anything that you have seen at Meridian West?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think actually, one of the things that I think professional firms hardly ever do is actually involve the clients in this planning process to start with. And actually, why don't you take a few clients who are your intended audience and kind of ask them, what themes they're particularly interested in or how they want to consume content. We did just that with with one client we were working with earlier in the year. We did a big survey of their C-suite client population, exactly about how they preferred to consume content. And it avoids you going down that blind alley of producing that long form report when actually what they want is podcasts. They want stuff that they can listen to on demand. They want bite size. They want things kind of chunked up. So I would always say that, yeah, great to get internal engagement in the planning phase, but don't forget your audience. They're not they don't come right at the end of the process. It's important to involve them throughout if you can.
And Sasha, have you tried retesting any of the content releases and things like that? How have you been approaching this at Pinsent Masons?
So one actual recent example is we looked to develop a new product, and we actually went out to a couple of clients within the sector that we were looking to market it to and said to them, this is something that we're looking to develop, this is how we're looking to price it, this is how we're looking to market it. And they came back and said, actually, we think this pricing model might work a little bit better, knowing our market, etc. And then we use that to frame the content and also the pricing model. So yeah, I think it really works. And I think it's something partners are a bit scared to do sometimes. But if you've got a couple of friendly clients, they're more than willing to have conversations about what they like and what they don't like. And also, actually, just one other point, I think for us on this current project, having worked with Meridian West has been so helpful because they've been able to say, this is what's happening in the market, this is what we're seeing. So you've kind of I've got my Pinsent Masons hat on, and they can kind of tell me a bit more about actually what other people are seeing as well, what they're seeing, what research models they're using, things like that. So that's been really helpful for us.
Another question that has come in is how thought leadership is being used, and is it being used as a profile raising tool at the moment, or is it being used in a more targeted business development way, or can it do both? I mean, Suzanne, any thoughts on how thought leadership is being used at the moment?
Yeah, I think it can do both, actually. I think you've got to be clear, like in the planning stage, I didn't mention, but I think your starting point is your objectives. And those need to be very crystallized and signed off by your stakeholders. So whether it's, a piece, an output that's to support a tactical, client service proposition, or it's something that's to support brands, your brand building and your awareness and stuff in the marketplace. So, but some projects can do 2 or 3 of those things. They can just be a statement to say, actually, I'm in this. We do M&A, and you just need something on the website to say this is what we do. So there's multiple objectives, and I think, just be clear at the beginning what you're doing it for, so that therefore everything you do in that campaign follows and looks like the kind of output that serves the purpose that you've set for it.
And Alastair, I'm guessing that would echo very much the approach that you're seeing at Meridian West as well.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, I think, you know, I think it's kind of inevitable that you need to have your kind of focus on, you know, on a clear set of objectives. I think you can build brand at the same time as, you know, have a more business development focused campaign. But the thing I would say is at the moment, clearly those big picture events, the big sponsorships, you know, clearly they're not possible in the way that they might have been 12 months ago. So actually having content that you can take directly to clients, you know, is both a kind of brand builder in its own way, but also a kind of conversation starter. And as I said before, it's that kind of insight that clients are really looking for.
Yeah. So another question that's come in, and I love this one because it's an issue that we've come across many times over, and this is the challenge between sector approach or firm-wide approach to thought leadership. And the question that being asked is does a campaign lose its impact when you are trying to appeal across multiple sectors at a firm-wide level, or are you better focusing thought leadership at that sector level? Now, Sasha, I'm going to pick on you for this one to kick off with, just because the campaign you're leading is very much driven as a sector approach, and perhaps what's the experience at Pinsent Masons over firm-wide and sector approaches to thought leadership?
So I would say most of our thought leadership would be sector focused. That is our firm strategy, where we go to market through our sectors. So we think targeting certain audiences and talking to them about a specific piece that's of interest to them resonates a lot more than doing a general kind of umbrella topic. However, we obviously can't ignore Brexit or climate change or things like that, and we do need to be talking about them. But what we've tried to do, particularly taking kind of climate change as an example, is come at it from an umbrella perspective, but actually go to each of our sectors and say, okay, how does this resonate with your audience, and how are we pushing this out to your audience? And it might look different for each sector. So rather than having a blanket approach for everyone, it's an individual approach for each sector that they're working with.
Suzanne, it's interesting. We see the big four accountancy firms are quite good at those umbrella sort of big campaigns. Do you think accountancy firms, well, let's rephrase that. Do you think law firms are better at sector driven thought leadership, and the accountancy firms are better at that big umbrella thought leadership, or is that too much of a generalization?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I can't be confident that you know, it's horses for courses, isn't it, Matt? It's similar. There's a question in the chat as well. I don't know if you've seen it from Sam. Is similar question here about service lines and how a big project can a big project actually support a number of service lines, and I think if you manage to curate it well, it probably can. And you know, going to market by sector, I think in a big survey like Sam's mentioned, if you've got enough respondents, you can do sector cuts. So you can actually have a perspective in automotive and a perspective in industrial manufacturing. That's for the really big ones. And what's interesting is you can draw on things at the top that show the differences between the different sectors. It becomes even more interesting for the overall point of view. But I think the big four, at the time I was most closely working in the big four, there was an attempt to, rather than do a lot of piecemeal sector research, to actually bring it to the top and create 3 or 4 big brand defining pieces of research that served everybody.
We're nearly out of time, so I'm going to do one final question to each of you before we say goodbye. So, and the question is, putting you on the spot a little bit, is where do you see thought leadership going next year? Are we likely to be the sort of the quick and dirty campaigns? Are we likely to see the big set pieces? What do you predict for next year? So, Alastair, I'm really sorry, I'm going to get you to kick this one off.
Really quickly, I think kind of what I anticipate seeing is a kind of continued fragmentation. So on the one hand, very quick pulse type surveys, quick to market, you know, COVID changes, lockdown 2.0, what does that mean? We need some instant reaction, and we need, you know, to put some commentary out there. On the other hand, I think a bit like Sasha was saying earlier, you know, more considered, and Suzanne, more considered content, less urgency to get it out there, but time to breathe, to consider, to reflect, to draw in expertise, and produce something really crafted and thoughtful for clients.
Fantastic. Sasha?
I would completely agree with that. I'd also add that if we are in the place that we're in at the moment, we probably won't have loads of budget to do massive projects. So perhaps kind of keeping with the smaller pieces, maybe where we'll see ourselves in the next 6 months, unless we have a miraculous recovery. Fingers crossed.
And Suzanne?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it's going to be a tricky year as well, though. I think there's going to be it's going to be really difficult to decide when to kind of break ranks from your COVID-19 portals and explore a topic outside that lens. I think that's going to be key. And to keep the balance between positive and more measured kind of empathetic messaging that I think we all have in our content at the moment, going to be tricky. And I don't think, we're going to be away from the situation we're in right now for at least another, 9 months.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. That is our half an hour spot up and over on time. So thank you ever so much, Sasha, Suzanne, Alastair, and we will see you all hopefully again next week.